Welcome back, everyone. Today we're taking a look at another TOEFL Speaking Task 1 question that appeared on a recent exam. So the question's asking, should the government subsidize the construction of museums and theaters? So this is a question that's similar to some other ones that have appeared in the past year or so. And again, I call these government questions because it's always about the government, whether they should fund something. Maybe it should be a national park, a local park, or it should be a library or education, something along these lines. It's always related to the government funding something, whether they should do it or somebody else. In this case, we're talking about the government subsidizing the construction of museums and theaters. So, same deal, don't panic. Just the focus is going to be a little bit different. If you do run into like an advanced word like subsidize, do realize it's just related to funding, okay? So anytime you see something like this, it just means to financially take care of something. Now here I put yes for my opinion. I felt it was easier to go with. And then for my reason, I had a more complicated reason. And if that happens to you, stick to it. Don't panic. You could work your way through it. So here I said, private donors are too stingy. They're too cheap. Could be true, could not be true. Your answer doesn't have to be real. You could be creative. Because I have a cool idea for this one in the example. Now for my example, I'm going to focus on a local museum. So I don't have to talk about both of these. I could even talk about one of them. And that's what I did here. Okay, local museum. I'm just imagining this, right? In a small city or small town, right? Imagine poor funding. So that's what I have here, because my first sentence is going to introduce that thing I want to talk about or discuss. The next detail is going to be about what happens to it. So here I'm just imagining these private donors, they're only donating like a few $100s, a few thousand, maybe not that much, right? So, well, that's what's going on here. And then in my final detail, I want to just basically mention the consequence of this. What is that final result? Well, if they're not adequately funding that, probably the museum has to be shut down. The city is going to close it, right? So that's what's going on here. Now, when we break this down, this is what your response would kind of look like. Well, I definitely think that the government should subsidize the construction of museums and theaters because private donors are too stingy. There we go. So we're going to see how I support this argument. In case you didn't know, stingy means cheap, right? Take my local museum as an example. So this is a great way of introducing an example, a fast way. Take my local museum as an example. Or take my local theater as an example. So practice, using this phrase over and over till you get used to it. We had a small art museum in my town. Now, when you go into your example, try your best to be a little bit more specific. Don't just say museum. Maybe a history museum, an art museum, right? Be creative. In my town that needed lots of funding to survive. So I'm introducing the example or situation right here. And that's where this is. Then I'm going to go into what's happening to it, right? I'm going from general to specific. Unfortunately, it received most of its money from private donations, and this didn't do much to cover all the operating costs. Here, I have some jargon like operating costs, cover, private donations. You may or may not have like thematic vocab, but try your best to practice using them. It'll boost your score. Now here, this is just going to be the end result, the consequence. So obviously, if they're not receiving enough support, what's going to happen, right? There's going to be a consequence in the end. In the end, the city, right, the town, decided to shut down the museum. That's it. Keep it just brief, to the point, very specific. Now here, I decided to use this had sentence instead of an if sentence. It's the same deal. It functions the same exact way, right? We're thinking about conditionals here. Had there been public funding from the government, right? Because that's the opposite view, the opposite choice. I want to imagine what would be the consequence of that. This strengthens or reinforces my overall argument. The museum would have been still around today, clearly, right? So I hope you guys were able to understand this example. I hope you like this one. So again, even if you have like a more difficult reason here, you could still work your way through it. As long as you're able to support it, that's all that ETS cares about. Okay guys, please like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.